They gotta wait for Bioarcane Barrage the second time around as Apollo can go right back in and he finds the kill. Niski's dominating. A slow in the back line. He wants the action and Niski gets it. That was huge out of him, and now that's one of the carries gone. Double force drop, and he could be stunned up. The chase is in for Niski. A triple kill out of the Lucian in the mid lane. They're gonna go for number 4, a quadra kill for Niski. And it's only Biofrost left alive. It's going to be Envy pulling off the victory. Niski with 4.
Are you kidding me with that flash forward?
Hello and welcome to Week 8 NA LCS tonight. I'm Dash here with Kobe and Azael to break down all the happenings from the week, all the important happenings, because we can't hit absolutely everything. So first things first, let's pull up the standings here in the North American LCS, see where teams land. We finally have our playoff picture locked in terms of the 6 teams that'll be participating. Some seeding still left to be decided, but those 6 teams are TSM, Immortals, CLG, Cloud9, Team Dignitas, and Team Envy. But gentlemen, the talk of the town coming into today was the possibility with a CLG win and a TSM win to be back into that 3-way tie for first, and then TSM goes and, or not TSM, CLG goes and drops their series, makes it a 2-horse race.
TSM's happy about that.
They
like,
are
great,
very happy about that.
No horse that we have to go against.
One less horse. I mean, CLG, I think, they still have an opportunity because they are playing TSM next week. So, you know, they still have a chance to get back into the top 2 spots. You know, maybe the horse can re-enter the race. There you go. But
oh my
God.
God.
I think the thing is, there's some growing pains for CLG.
Yes.
Very obviously, right? It kind of sucks for them. Whether Omar God is going to be better for the future of the team or not, there's going to be an adjusting period. He is new to the scene, and they're not at the same level, I think, you know, of consistency that they maybe were before.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the big ticket series from the weekend. First up, Dignitas taking down Immortals, that number 1 seeded team, in a 2-1 series.
Yeah, I mean, this one, I didn't get to watch live, but looks like we got some good kills up here with the Gnar going on. Azael points to me like,
how many horses
go ahead
are
and
in this
review
game?
this one. I'm like, what?
Well, I mean, the thing with Dignitas is that
I should just start doing this show alone.
Hey, don't blame me. This is Cody.
We need
the horses.
We're
now
doing. We got the 2 streams here.
Why is he even here?
Oh boy! All right, Azael, take
team,
it.
I think that has been improving a lot. For me, like I have been kind of trying to measure expectation because of how well they started.
Did you watch the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of how well they started, and then you know they started 5-1, they go to 5-5. Yes, they make some changes. They've been doing well since then, but then they have a series kind of in the middle against C9 where it felt like they got slammed. And I do think that they have improved and they are a strong team, but it's still hard for me to say like, okay, this team is much above their standings. You know, like how good really are they? Are they a top 2 team? Are they just where they deserve to be, you know, because the roster has changed recently and they've shown such different results.
I think that the bottom lane is just objectively better. All right,
yeah.
You know, the change for them has been 100%, you know, improvement. As far as how far can they actually go now, then that's still really rough because as we've been saying, the playoff games are going to be the most exciting that we have had in a very, very long time because of how closely contested they are going to be.
Strict upgrade in the bot lane. Even Keen has been showing up quite a bit here in the most recent weeks, particularly on that Cassiopeia pick. The other big thing I think that we have to attribute to Dignitas is that to me, they feel like one of the top 6 teams that has the best understanding of the meta and seem to me to be the most dangerous in champions like this, especially when you put them across from a team like Immortals, who seems to be misreading the meta, right? Giving away the Maokai multiple times to someday, not necessarily prioritizing those picks the way they might or rather should.
And I mean, while misreading a meta is somewhat concerning, that's so much more fixable than like, you're losing all your lanes, or you don't know how to play macro anymore, right? So yes, it's not good if Immortals is struggling in pick and ban, but that is something that is fixable as long as you have a good read on it going into playoffs, right? And that is the key thing, and that is sometimes what we have seen Immortals fall prey to, you know, with the famous Lucian top and these sorts of things. You get a misread on the meta, you don't get another chance when you're in the playoffs.
All right, now let's dive into that CLG Phoenix 1 series that happened today. Phoenix 1 coming out on top 2-1 off the back end of a couple of huge performances from Arrow.
And I mean, the CLG, I think, while they have been at the top, it's always been somewhat inconsistent, and now Omar God coming in, there is an adjustment period, I think, for him. Yes, they got a 2-0 yesterday, I believe, or earlier this weekend.
Right.
But I mean, P1 taking that series, it's good for them, but they still are like really, really struggling. They're still, fighting to not get into the promo relegations.
Yeah, I think definitely the main story of this series is that while CLG yesterday, their win over Envy, it was mostly off of the solo laners, and even the bottom lane, like creating most of the stuff. Omar did fine in that series. He wasn't, kind of the driving force in the victory though. And the problems that they run into are when, the tower dives and stuff starts to come through. Like, those are definitely worrying things for them. As Azale was talking about earlier, this is mostly about building synergy for CLG and how quickly can they actually do this?
Right. The other thing within that series itself, the 2 losses from CLG came off the back end of some really questionable early game plays, right? They gave away pretty large advantages to Phoenix 1 so early on into the game. And a lot of times when I'm looking at a matchup and I say this team is so clearly better, I'd rather see that team play somewhat safer for that very early portion. Don't hand over 3 kills in the first 4 minutes and put yourself at a 1.5K deficit at 4 minutes and 30 seconds into the game.
While I definitely agree, I think you can play maybe a slower, more measured game if you're sure that you're better. And I think that's the best strategy to win an individual series. Okay. But what I don't believe that's the best strategy for is becoming the best team. Gotcha. So, if you're going to play measured, you need to play the same way that you would against TSM, against P1, against all these teams, right? So if you're saying, well, the best play in this specific situation is to make this dive, even if it's risky, I think you should do it because you're trying to become the best team. You're trying to be a team that could take down TSM or take down Immortals or whatever in the playoffs. And that's at least the way I see it.
Absolutely fair point, right? And when we talk about the development of Omar God, he's only got so many opportunities to basically experience as many different situations as he can on a big stage so that come playoffs, he's not as thrown in a 5-game series up against TSM when something doesn't go their way. On the topic of TSM, they have a 2-0 week, smashing series against FlyQuest, and then a very tough series today against Envy. I mean, in all honesty, probably shouldn't have won this series today and eked it out.
I mean, this was an incredibly long one, and you talk about, TSM, trying things out and trying to learn different strategies and become a more dynamic team. Afterwards, they talked a little bit about, we wanted to put some more time in on some of these Ardent Sensor supports, and Firefrost wanted to do, maybe a little bit more late game from them. So they drafted a lot of these compositions that are not designed to end the game super early or crush early. Envy definitely exploited some weaknesses from TSM, and especially in the early game, and we got to see actually some pretty good games there. Lyra was on fire. Niski actually shows up really, really big for the team, and they really made TSM work for this one.
I mean, Niski on Lucian was insane. Niski
and
in general,
his Talio is actually very good too.
Yeah, he's actually been really good. I mean, I think this guy is not getting enough hype around him.
At all.
He got a lot of hype today.
Okay, well that's fair. But I mean, as a whole, right? You look at how much attention a lot of the rookies and guys coming into the league get, and people who are new to the NALCS, and Niski's not really getting that level of recognition. Compare to Mike Young and stuff, right?
Right.
It's night and day. And he has been playing very well, and he's playing very well on a team that's in playoffs. He's playing very well against top teams. He does deserve some credit. The guy is good.
No, there's a ton of individual talent on that team. I think that's very obvious, and part of that is just showcasing their ability to get the leads. I think where the team falls apart was in that Baron statistic. In Game 3, you pick up the Baron earlier on into the game than TSM with the gold lead, and you only extend that lead an extra 1,500 gold, including the Baron gold itself. TSM then fights back into it. When they get Baron, 4,500 gold into their pocket, and they end the game. Yes, they are different team comps. Yes, they are, excel at different things, but there were still many ways in which Envy could have utilized their comp to take more advantages in that late game with the Baron buff, and it's very clear that they don't necessarily understand how to use that global objective in the 3.5 minutes that they have it.
And sometimes that can speak to that killer instinct like we were talking about earlier, right? Having the confidence to actually, if you are going to get outscaled or whatever, then to be able to actually go aggressive and go for these sorts of plays that are Sony's best chance to win.
And I actually thought that one of the areas of improvement for Envy that we saw on display was some killer instincts, some very quick decision making for some of these Barons that they snuck or they traded to TSM for some of these Dragons. And I actually think the future looks brighter than I did for Envy than I did coming into this weekend. So I actually even though they are bottom of the playoff teams, they're definitely putting some fear as far as their recent performances into the other ones.
I mean, with the way the teams are trading wins in these last couple weeks, knowing what our 6 teams are already for playoffs with the Echo Fox loss today securing Envy's spot, it still very much feels like anyone's game when we get to those quarterfinals. I could see teams losing to Envy.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact of the matter is, if CLG goes into the playoffs looking kind of shaky, they could be the third-place seed. That could be Envy's first-round matchup, and that is something that, you know, is doable.
Lyra will definitely
He'd have the time of his life.
try and
there.
have the time of his life. We say that CLG
Right.
just, you know, stomped Envy in a quick 2-0,
Right.
but
Yes.
it's still a possibility.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to the OP5 for the week. We're going to throw these up on your screen. In the top lane, we got Hanser, Contracts and Jensen, Jungle and Mid, and Doublift and Smoothie rounding out ADC and support. Any big-ticket guys here that you want to talk about, stand out?
I also think Ole deserves a lot of, you know, praise for the support role. That was highly contested, where he was going to get that slot as well. This guy, he's got, people have talked about it. He kind of changes the way that the enemy team is even playing the game due to his roams. Like, when Ole goes missing, you definitely take notice, right?
Yeah, I think Smoothie as well did have a really good week, and he's playing, you know, a different kind of subset of champions sometimes. Like, he showed it on Blitzcrank. He's actually one of the guys who's playing a lot of Taric, which I think is actually
And he has
super
been for a
strong,
long time, and I think that's the part that shows.
Yeah.
Like, he's not somebody who's just picked up Taric. Oh, Taric got buffs. Let me go play some Taric.
Right.
Like, he's put in some work on this.
I think it was Irene who was saying, you know, last week that the Taric was picked up by who first here in the summer split of NALCS. I can't remember exactly who it was. He spoke to Smoothie that day, and he's like, I guess Taric's back in the meta, I'm going to start playing him again. And he just picked it right back up, again, showing that he's got enough practice on that champion, he can pull it right back out of his back pocket.
I do think that Contracts and Jensen deserve a little bit of a call-out, though, as these guys, I think, worked incredibly well together this weekend. Yes, they were playing against maybe some of the lower-level competition, but, like, the way that even just the three that are in the OP5 today played against FlyQuest, like, I felt bad for High. There was 3 people in his lane over and over and over. I mean, Jensen ended with, what, 16 kills on the block? Something like that?
That's the type of the stuff that they were doing at Rift Rivals, right? It was the same type of gameplay, and Contracts has had these big games where he completely just snowballs out of control, and a lot of the times Jensen is the beneficiary. And then once you get Jensen a lead, he's like, okay, time for solo kills, and he starts moving around the map.
And I think the big question for C9 going towards playoffs is that, yes, they can execute this single strategy very well against lower tier teams. But what happens when you go up against Bjergsen and Sven Skaren in the mid lane and you can't build quite as large of an advantage and you need your side lanes to cover for you a little bit more? Will they still find success?
I mean, I think that has been the concern for Cloud9, at least for me, all year long, is how is the top lane going to do, right? When top lane shows up, I think they're an extremely strong team. I think the rest of the map has been pretty strong. But if top lane is not showing up, we know teams like TSM can play around every lane, right? We've seen how well Bjergsen plays around top lane. We have not seen, I think, really a single game where, like, Jensen gets ahead and then snowballs the hell out of Ray or Impact. Like, it doesn't really seem to happen, right? They're much more one-dimensional, I think, in that way. Yes, you see Jensen go bot lane a lot, and you see those sorts of plays, but other teams who can go anywhere, it's so much harder to predict, it's so much harder to prepare.
Also, this aspect of the speed at which they make mid-game calls feels a little bit slower than a lot of the other top teams, right? When we'll see, like, even CLG in their weakened state, or TSM or one of these teams, right? As soon as they get a pick, it's like instantly, you know, they're trying to pressure a minion wave on this side or go for a turret over here. But it seems sometimes in Cloud9's games, as you get later into the game, they are a little bit more reactive than some of the other top teams, and they're not quite as quick.
I think you have a phone message. Anyway, earlier today we started talking about MVPs as we are moving towards the final week of the split, and we hit you up, asked for you to weigh in on the conversation for MVP on Twitter. First up, Chain Brain says MVP should be Xmithie, who turned a 7th place team into a contender for first.
I don't think it's that obvious. Even on Immortals, look at Ole. This guy's been a monster.
Yeah. Plus, every time I talk to Bill Belter, he can't say enough about the coach, right? And how big of a change that was. And that was at the same time that they brought Xmithie in. So a lot of people kind of lump in, you know, some of the coaching improvements with the Xmithie change. And to be fair, Xmithie is a great in-game leader and very good at communicating as well. But we're never sure about the blurred lines.
Right, next up, The Bull says, Who He has my MVP vote. Teams have to throw bans at him or they lose the game. Not to mention his roaming keeps them scared.
That's true. And it's not even just Aurelion Sol anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, Hui has been extremely good, and I think he has been improving, and he has a level of consistency that he didn't in the past.
I'm loving to watch him, loving watching him play Taliyah, especially since the ASOL at this point has pretty much become a permaban. The Taliyah slotting in, allowing him to affect those side lanes, take those objectives at free will. Lastly, Little Vicomte, let's go with that. Harry Polden. That's so much easier to say. Anyway, MVP has to be Junsung Ole. This is the only voting where a support has a solid chance of winning, and that shows something.
Well, the only part I would disagree with is that Smoothie's definitely up there with him as far as, supports, but I have to agree in how impressive Ole has been.
I mean, honestly, MVP voting is going to be very interesting because I think there's like maybe 8, even 10 people who could be getting votes here. That's like pretty reasonable across a lot of different teams.
Right.
There's a lot of players I've heard people confidently speak of as a favorite, and I'm like, well, I mean, not everyone's a favorite.
I got to pick your brain a little bit earlier today about some of your MVP targets, but what about you? Is there a player not on this list that you're looking at should be in the conversation? Not that you're casting your ballot now, but like that you think should be considered for MVP?
Yeah, I still think even with the resurgence or the emergence of these new MVP votes, basically like Ole and some of the guys on Dignitas even.
Right.
And Lyra's the argument. Okay, well that's a deep argument. But yeah, as far as junglers go, he's definitely for me #1 jungler.
Okay.
But as far as MVPs in the overall voting that you're talking about, I still find it hard for me to pry myself away from the guys that have consistently been there, like Bjergsen, Double Lift, these names that everyone just immediately will think of.
Right.
Because...
And they almost get faulted for their consistency, because you don't see those hugely spectacular moments that depart from their normal play.
Or people just kind of build up this feeling that they're like, I want change.
Right.
And we've had to, Bjergsen's too good all the time, so... Looking, for the hipster votes or whatever, but
would you agree that this might be the closest vote for MVP this split than any previous split? That there are more contenders, maybe is the way I should word that?
Yeah, more contenders, I would certainly say. Bjergsen, I completely agree. Doublelift, I'm not so convinced this time around. I feel like he wasn't as dominant as he was, in 2016 with TSM. So for me, maybe he's fallen off the list a little bit.
And this is what's going to make the conversation interesting and the ultimate ballot totals that much more interesting. That's going to do it for Week 8 here in North America. Say goodbye to you tonight. We'll see you next Friday for the final week of the regular season.